At 30,000 feet, the radio crackled with a direct order from command. Abort, intercept. Return to base immediately. Major Sarah Jennings hovered her finger over the throttle. If she obeyed, the President of the United States would be dead in 3 minutes. She killed her radio instead. The North Atlantic was a boiling cauldron of black clouds and electrostatic fury. Inside the cockpit of her F-22 Raptor, call sign Ghost 1, Major Sarah Grit Jennings felt the violent shudder of the turbulence, rattling her teeth. The altimeter read 35,000 feet, but even up here, the colossal supercell storm system was throwing her 20-ton stealth fighter around like a toy in a washing machine. Ghost 2, keep your spacing tight. This crosswind is murder, Sarah said, her voice steady, betraying none of the physical strain it took to keep the jet level. Copy that, Grit. I'm glued to your right wing, replied Captain Thomas Croft. His Raptor was a faint, grey shadow slipping in and out of the thick, electrified cloud cover. Their mission was supposed to be a standard combat air patrol, CAP, 200 miles to their east. Air Force One, carrying President Arthur Pendleton back from a highly classified, the unannounced summit in Reykjavik, was descending through the storm corridor toward the eastern seaboard. The Boeing VC-25A, a flying fortress by most standards, was nonetheless a heavy, lumbering target. In weather, this chaotic, radar systems were strained, heavily reliant on the E-3 Sentry AWACS circling high above the storm to provide a unified tactical picture. Sarah's eyes scanned the multi-fiber displays. Her F-22's sensor fusion was the best in the world, collating data from the AN/APG-77 radar and passive sensors to paint a god's-eye view of the airspace. For the last 2 hours, it had been a sea of green friendlies and commercial civilian traffic, safely routed hundreds of miles away. Then, a flicker. At the edge of her tactical display, 6 amber blips materialized. They were low-skimming the icy crests of the Atlantic waves and moving obscenely fast. Mach 1.4. AWACS, Ghost 1. I have 6 unidentified bogies, bearing 040, speed 1,000 knots. Please confirm, Sarah transmitted, her pulse ticking up a notch. Static hissed in her earpiece. The geomagnetic interference from the storm was severe, but the encrypted Link 16 network should have compensated. Ghost 1, this is Overlord. The voice of Master Sergeant Calvin Riggs aboard the AWACS came through, sounding strained. We are seeing anomalies on the low-tier sweep, attempting to interrogate IFF transponders now. Stand by. Sarah didn't like anomalies. She dropped her oxygen mask a fraction of an inch to take a sharper breath. Thomas, you seeing this? Affirmative, Grit, Croft replied, his tone shedding its relaxed demeanor. They're in a tight delta formation. Whatever they aren't commercial airliners, and they're vectoring straight toward the package. The package. President Pendleton. Before Sarah could bank her Raptor to intercept, a new voice overrode the frequency. It was loud, crisp, and carried the heavy brass authority of NORAD Command at Joint Base Andrews. Ghost Flight. This is Colonel Harrison Hayes. You are ordered to disregard those tracks. I repeat, disregard. Sarah frowned beneath her tinted visor. Colonel Hayes was a desk jockey, a bureaucratic operator who rarely intervened directly on tactical channels. Command, this is Ghost 1. I have 6 fast movers on an intercept trajectory with Air Force One. We need to ID them. Negative, Major Jennings, Hayes snapped, using her rank and name, a clear warning. Our cyber division just flagged a massive software desynchronization in the Link 16 network. Those are ghost tracks, radar echoes bouncing off the upper mesosphere and the storm front. You are chasing phantoms. Colonel, with respect, my passive sensors are picking up faint thermal bloom, Sarah argued, her fingers dancing across the multifunction displays. MFDs. Those aren't echoes. They're generating heat. They are physical aircraft. Major, the F-15 escort group from Seymour Johnson is already repositioning to cover the President's descent. The storm is degrading your flight envelope. You and Captain Croft are ordered to RTB immediately. Turn around, Ghost 1. Stand down. Sarah stared at the display. The F-15 Eagles that were supposed to be riding on Air Force One's flanks were suddenly vectoring south. Her tactical map updated command had ordered the escorts away, responding to a phantom distress signal from a Coast Guard cutter 300 miles in the wrong direction. They're pulling the Eagles away, Croft whispered over their private inter-flight data link. Grit, what is going on? Command, The escorts are leaving the corridor, Sarah said, fighting to keep her voice level. Air Force One is completely exposed. Major Jennings, you are bordering on insubordination, Hayes barked, his voice dripping with venom. The President's airspace is secure. The anomalies are system errors. If you do not change your heading to 270 and return to base this instant, you will land under military arrest. Do I make myself clear? In the military, an order from a superior officer is absolute. To disobey a direct command in a combat theatre, even a domestic one, was professional suicide. It meant court-martial, Leavenworth, the end of her life as she knew it. The system was designed to rely on the chain of command, to trust that the men in the secure bunkers had the bigger picture. But Sarah had spent 15 years in the cockpit. She had flown in Syria and Iraq. She knew the difference between a software glitch and the synchronized predatory movements of a wolf pack. The 6 amber blips weren't drifting like radar errors. They were adjusting their heading, correcting for the wind, masking their approach in the thickest part of the storm radar clutter. They were hunting. Thomas, Sarah said over the private link. Turn back. Follow the RTB order. Grit. What about you? I'm having a sudden communication failure, Sarah lied flawlessly. Return to base. Croft, don't throw your career away. Grit, you're going to get yourself locked up. Do it, Thomas. Now. With a heavy silence, Croft's F-22 banked sharply to the west, his afterburners flashing bright blue against the grey clouds before vanishing. Sarah was alone. She reached up and switched her primary encrypted radio to the off position. She killed the transponder. In a matter of seconds, she wiped her own signature from the NORAD grid. To Colonel Harrison Hayes, Major Sarah Jennings had just ceased to exist. Sarah pushed the throttle forward, engaging supercruise. The Raptor surged forward, breaking the sound barrier without the need for fuel-guzzling afterburners. The sheer acceleration pushed her back into her ejection seat. She dove into the belly of the storm, dropping from 35,000 feet to 10,000 feet in a dizzying, violent descent. Hail battered the radar-absorbent skin of her canopy like machine gun fire. Lightning strobed in the blackness, illuminating the cockpit in blinding, magnesium-white flashes. By dropping low, she was using the storm's heavy precipitation and the curvature of the earth to mask her approach. If those were real jets, they wouldn't see her coming. If she was wrong, and Hayes was right, she was flying straight into the ocean for a court-martial. Suddenly, her backup analog radio, set to the UHF guard frequency, the International Distress Channel, hissed to life. It was a raw, unencrypted line, rarely used unless everything else failed. Ghost 1, Grit, are you out there? It was Master Sergeant Riggs. His voice was a frantic whisper, completely devoid of standard military protocol. I'm here, Riggs. What the hell is happening at command? Grit, thank God. Riggs breathed heavily. Don't trust Hayes. The AWACS is completely locked out. We've been hit by a zero-day cyber attack. Someone from inside NORAD initiated a localized blackout on the command network. They fed false coordinates to the F-15 escorts. They fed Hayes a script. Is Hayes part of it? Sarah asked, her blood running cold. I don't know, but he's blinded by his own screens and refusing to listen to us. I bypassed the mainframe to hit this analog transmitter. Grit, those 6 blips. They're not ghosts. They are real. Who are they? They aren't squawking, and they don't match any known Russian or Chinese radar cross-sections. They are stealth, highly modified. And Grit, they are carrying long-range air-to-air ordnance. They're 5 minutes out from Air Force One. The President has no escort. You are the only thing between them and the package. Copy that, Riggs. I'm engaging. Sarah's hands flew across her consoles. She brought her weapon systems online. The F-22's internal bays were loaded for bear. 6 AIM, 120D AMRAAM radar-guided missiles, and 2 AIM, 9X Sidewinders for close-in dogfighting. 8 missiles, 6 targets. It was a terrifying mathematical equation. She leveled out at 5,000 feet, flying just above the churning Atlantic waves. The storm was thick here, a wall of grey mist and horizontal rain. She switched her radar to passive mode using the ALR 9-4 threat warning receiver. She wouldn't send out radar waves to find them, which would alert them to her presence. She would listen for the electronic noise their jets made. 2 minutes passed in agonizing tension. The G-forces gnawed at her spine as she made micro-adjustments against the gale force winds. Then, her threat receiver pinged. Target acquired. She looked up through the heads-up display. HUD. The storm clouds fractured for a brief moment, revealing a patch of bruised, twilight sky. And there they were, 6 fighters flying in a perfect, aggressive echelon formation. They were painted in a matte, light-devouring charcoal black. They had no insignias, no tail numbers, no national markings. Their airframes were angular, aggressive, a hybrid design that looked like a terrifying cross between an Su-57 Felon and a YF-23. Mercenaries? A rogue Black Ops division? It didn't matter. Sarah checked her tactical link. Air Force One was only 40 miles away, descending directly into the path of the hostile squadron. The lumbering 747 was completely blind to the danger, cruising peacefully under the false assurance of cleared airspace. Suddenly, the leader of the Black Squadron pitched up, initiating a climb to intercept altitude. Sarah's radar warning receiver screamed a high-pitched, metallic tone. Beep. It wasn't a lock on her. The hostile lead fighter was activating its targeting radar, locking onto Air Force One. The other 5 jets fanned out, creating an impenetrable wall of air supremacy, ready to swat down any last-minute interference. They thought they had won. They thought the corridor was empty. Major Sarah Jennings gripped the flight stick, her breathing slow and controlled despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. She was outnumbered 6-1, stripped of her command support, and branded a rogue element by her own commanding officer. "Not on my watch," Sarah whispered into her oxygen mask. She slammed the throttle into full afterburner, the twin F-119 engines erupting in a pillar of fire, propelling her straight up into the belly of the hostile formation. The sheer vertical climb slammed Sarah into the back of her ejection seat with the crushing weight of 7 Gs. Her G-suit instantly inflated, constricting her calves and thighs in a vice-like grip to force the blood back up into her brain, preventing a blackout. Her vision tunneled, the edges of the cockpit blurring into grey, but her eyes remained locked on the heads-up display. The 6 hostiles were cruising at 20,000 feet, perfectly arranged in their lethal echelon, utterly unaware of the F-22 Raptor rocketing up from the stormy abyss directly beneath them. Stealth aircraft are designed to evade radar from the front and sides, but belly up, against the raw, unbridled power of a Raptor climbing in full afterburner, their thermal signatures were as bright as the sun. "Master arm on," Sarah muttered, her thumb toggling the weapons switch on her flight stick. The F-22's internal weapons bay doors snapped open. For a fraction of a second, opening the bays ruined her stealth profile, creating a radar cross-section that would ping on the enemy's screens. But it didn't matter. She was already in their blind spot. Fox 3, she breathed. 2 AIM, 120D AMRAAM missiles dropped from the belly of her jet. Their solid propellant rockets ignited with a blinding flash, leaving dual trails of white smoke as they accelerated to Mach 4. The hostile formation realized they were under attack less than 2 seconds before impact. Their radar warning receivers must have screamed, but the AMRAAMs were already terminal, utilizing their own active radar seekers to paint the targets. The 2 trailing jets in the enemy formation never had a chance to deploy countermeasures. The missiles slammed into their fuselages in spectacular, concussive detonations. The explosions ripped through the storm clouds, turning the 2 black fighters into raining shrapnel and blossoming fireballs that rapidly tumbled toward the Atlantic. 4 left. The remaining hostiles scattered instantly, breaking their tight formation with terrifying, robotic precision. They didn't panic. They didn't break radio silence. They dove in 4 separate directions, executing flawless defensive splits that told Sarah everything she needed to know. These weren't rogue amateurs or third-world conscripts. These were apex predators, top-tier, highly trained fighter pilots, flying 5th-generation hardware. Sarah leveled out, rolling her Raptor inverted to track their descent through the glass canopy. Suddenly, her own cockpit erupted in blaring alarms. Missile launch. Missile launch. End. "Damn it," she grunted. One of the hostiles had managed to snap off a heat-seeking missile during its evasion. It was coming in fast, spiraling up from the cloud deck. Sarah violently jerked the stick to the left, initiating a high G barrel roll. "Deploying flares," she yelled, slamming the countermeasures button. A fountain of burning magnesium shot out from the tail of her jet, creating a blinding cluster of false thermal targets. The enemy missile bit on the flares, detonating a mere 200 yards behind her exhaust nozzles. The shockwave rattled the Raptor, violently shaking the airframe and throwing Sarah's head against the canopy glass. Pain flared in her neck, but she didn't have time to process it. "Riggs, you still there?" Sarah shouted over the UHF analog channel as she pulled out of the roll. "I'm here, Grit. I'm patching you through to Air Force One's cockpit right now. Hang on." Static crackled, and then a new, panicked voice filled her helmet. "This is Colonel Robert Jackson, pilot of Air Force One." "Who is this?" "Command just told us our airspace is clear." "Colonel Jackson, this is Ghost One. Your airspace is compromised. Break right. Initiate emergency descent now. You have 4 hostile fast movers in your sector with active locks." "Command is telling me." "Forget command. Look out your damn window, Colonel," Sarah screamed. She pitched her nose down, diving after 2 of the hostiles that were circling back to re-engage. As she tracked them, the storm broke slightly, and in the distance, she saw it the massive, iconic blue and white silhouette of Air Force One. The Boeing VC-25A was a majestic flying palace, but right now, it was a sitting duck. "Oh my God," Colonel Jackson's voice came back, stripped of all protocol. "I see them. We are diving, evading." The massive 747 banked hard to the starboard side, dropping its nose toward the ocean in a desperate, stomach-churning dive. But the enemy leader, a fighter painted with a single, dark, crimson stripe down its tail, ignored Sarah entirely. He and his wingman bypassed her dogfight and accelerated straight toward the president's plane. "No, you don't," Sarah snarled. She jammed the throttle forward, intending to pursue, but the 2 remaining hostile jets cut her off. They boxed her in, forcing her into a lethal, close-quarters turning fight. It was a classic pincer maneuver. The G-forces spiked to 8, then 9. Sarah's breathing became a series of aggressive, forced grunts, the M1 anti-G straining maneuver. She was fighting the machine, the storm, and her own failing consciousness. The hostile on her left tried to pull lead for a gunshot. Sarah chopped her throttle, hit the speed brakes, and executed a post-stall maneuver. The Raptor reared up like a cobra, bleeding off hundreds of knots of airspeed in a second. The enemy fighter overshot, flashing past her canopy in a blur of black metal. Before he could correct, Sarah pushed the nose down, acquired a lock with her helmet-mounted cueing system, and squeezed the trigger. Fox 2, an AIM 9X Sidewinder, leapt from her side weapons bay. At this range, evasion was mathematically impossible. The missile drove itself straight up the enemy's tailpipe. The jet disintegrated in a blinding flash of aviation fuel and shattered titanium. 3 left, but the victory cost her. By bleeding her speed, she was a momentary static target for the other fighter. Brrrt. A stream of 30mm cannon fire tore through the sky. Sarah rolled desperately, but she felt the violent shudder as several rounds stitched across her left wing. Alarms lit up her MFDs like a Christmas tree. Hydraulic pressure loss. Stealth coating compromised. Left aileron damage. The F-22 violently shuddered, threatening to flat spin into the ocean. Sarah fought the stick with both hands, using the thrust-vectoring engines to force the wounded bird to keep flying. "Ghost One, this is Jackson. They are locking us up. We can't shake them. Where are you?" "I'm coming, Jackson. Keep dropping," Sarah yelled, fighting her crippled jet into a pursuit vector. She had 1 enemy behind her, trying to line up a kill shot, and 2 enemies miles ahead, bearing down on the president. The calculus of survival was 0, but the calculus of duty demanded everything she had left. Major Sarah Jennings, a voice suddenly crackled over the raw UHF channel. It wasn't Riggs. It wasn't Jackson. It was a calm, chillingly familiar voice, dripping with arrogant composure. Sarah's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "You always were a stubborn flight risk, Grit," the voice replied. "Nash?" Sarah breathed, her eyes widening behind her visor. Gregory Nash, former USAF Top Gun. He had been dishonorably discharged 5 years ago after a botched Black Ops mission in Yemen and was presumed dead in a helicopter crash a year later. "They told me you were dead," she said, hauling the stick right to evade another burst of cannon fire from the wingman on her tail. "I was reborn, Major. Reborn into a private sector that actually understands power. President Pendleton is about to cut trillions in defense spending to sign his little peace treaty in Reykjavik. My employers can't let that happen. War is an economy, Jennings, and the president is bad for business." The conspiracy crystallized in Sarah's mind. Colonel Hayes wasn't just a bureaucrat. He was on the payroll. This wasn't just an assassination. It was a corporate coup d'etat, engineered by extreme elements within the military-industrial complex. They had blinded NORAD, sent the escorts away, and hired Nash to do the dirty work. "You're committing treason, Greg," Sarah growled. "I'm securing the future." "Stand down, Sarah. Your jet is crippled. You're outnumbered. Eject now, and I'll let search and rescue scoop you up. Interfere, and you die with him." Nash's fighter, the one with the crimson stripe, fell into perfect position behind Air Force One. The massive Boeing was only 2,000 feet above the violent ocean waves, nowhere left to dive. "Major Jennings, we have a missile lock warning. He's got us," Colonel Jackson screamed over the radio. Sarah looked at her radar. Nash was 5 miles ahead of her. The enemy wingman was right on her tail. If she stopped to fight the guy behind her, the president died. "Riggs, if you're listening to this," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a dead, icy calm. "Tell command the hostile lead is Gregory Nash. It's an inside job. Clean house." "What are you doing?" Riggs pleaded. Sarah slammed the throttles to the firewall. The damaged left engine screamed in protest, turbine blades rattling. But she didn't care. She ignored the enemy fighter on her tail. She ignored the incoming missile warnings blaring in her own cockpit. She bypassed her own safety limiters and pushed the crippled F-22 into a ballistic, supersonic dive toward Nash. The enemy wingman behind her fired an AMRAAM. Sarah didn't even drop flares. She just flew faster. "Nash," Sarah screamed over the radio. "Look in your rearview mirror." Nash, focused on Air Force One, glanced at his sensors a second too late. Sarah didn't have time to lock on with a missile. She selected her M61, A2 Vulcan rotary cannon. She had 480 rounds. At a closing speed of Mach 1.2, she squeezed the trigger and held it down. A stream of depleted uranium armor-piercing incendiary rounds erupted from the right wing root of her Raptor. The sheer volume of fire filled the airspace between her and Nash's jet. Nash panicked, violently breaking his lock on Air Force One to pull up and evade the wall of lead. But he wasn't fast enough. Sarah's 20mm rounds soared through his right wing, shredding his control surfaces. His stealth fighter erupted in a violent explosion of sparks and hydraulic fluid, entering an uncontrollable death spiral. "No!" Nash screamed over the radio, right before his jet slammed into the crest of a massive Atlantic wave, vaporizing instantly. But Sarah's victory was a fraction of a second long. The missile, fired by the wingman on her tail, was now 10 feet from her exhaust nozzle. "Ejecting!" Sarah screamed. She pulled the yellow ejection handle between her legs. The explosive bolts blew the canopy clear. A millisecond later, the rocket motor under her seat fired, blasting her up and out of the cockpit with a spine-compressing force of 20 Gs. Below her, the F-22 Raptor, Ghost 1, took the missile strike directly in the engines. The 20-ton fighter exploded in a spectacular fireball, scattering burning debris across the black sky. Sarah tumbled through the freezing, violent air. Her parachute deployed with a bone-jarring crack. She dangled in the harness, the icy rain lashing her face, the roaring wind deafening her. As she drifted downward toward the freezing ocean, she looked to the west. There, bursting through a parting in the storm clouds, bathed in the faint golden light of the setting sun, flew Air Force One. It was stable. It was safe. It was climbing back to cruising altitude. Below her, the last remaining hostile fighter, realizing the mission was completely botched and its leader was dead, aborted the attack. The black jet banked sharply to the north, hitting afterburners to disappear off the grid before NORAD could restore their systems. Sarah hit the freezing Atlantic water like a freight train. The shock of the cold knocked the wind out of her, but her survival instincts kicked in. She inflated her life raft, dragging her bruised, battered body out of the freezing swell. Huddled in the tiny orange raft, tossed by 10-foot waves, she activated her personal locator beacon. 4 hours later, the roaring downdraft of an HH-60 Pavehawk rescue helicopter hovered over her. A rescue swimmer dropped into the water, securing her in the harness. As she was winched up into the warm cabin of the chopper, a young pararescue jumper wrapped a thermal blanket around her shaking shoulders. He tapped his headset, looking at her with wide, awestruck eyes. "Major Jennings?" "Ma'am, we just got a direct patch from the Secretary of Defense, William Cobb. Colonel Harrison Hayes has been taken into custody by military police at Andrews. And, ma'am, the President wants to speak with you." Sarah leaned back against the bulkhead, the adrenaline finally crashing out of her system. She was exhausted, freezing, and her neck felt like it was broken. But as she looked out the open door of the chopper at the endless, dark ocean, a slow, grim smile crept across her face. She had been ordered to stand down, but she had held the line. What a breathtaking story of defiance and ultimate sacrifice. Major Sarah Jennings proved that true loyalty is to the people and the truth, not to corrupt orders. If this intense, high-stakes aerial dogfight got your adrenaline pumping and kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. Don't forget to share this incredible story of bravery with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, real-life action narratives. See you in the next video.